Hello and welcome to Artist on a Budget Cinematography Breakdown, where we'll be talking about cinematography and the lighting choices behind its lighting choices. So now we will be talking about Footprints on the Moon. It was an independent film shot in 2015, which wasn't completed. So we only have the trailer for that, and that's what we are going to be breaking down. Each shot in the trailer, we're gonna look at the lighting choices, why it was shot that way, and why it was lit that way. So if you haven't seen the trailer, you can click somewhere over here, but I've also included the link down in the description below. All right, so let's proceed to the first scene. Okay, so in this scene, this is actually one of my favorite shots in the film. Why? Because this is also one of the complicated shots to pull off. For one, because we were shooting at around, I think, what time we were shooting over here? We were filming around 12 a.m. Oh, no, 12 p.m. So the sun was really, really bright outside. So when I showed this shot to some of my friends, they thought that it was actually green screen. The window was green screened.
My friends.
Okay. So they thought that the window was green screen, but it actually wasn't. That's the real scenery outside. So what we did here is I added a 1.2K outside the window over here. So to act as the sun, because the sun is right overhead and there's no light coming from the sun that's coming into the window. So I added a 1.2 just above the frame on a boom arm, so it has the stand doesn't show in the frame. So that's what you see over here. That's the highlights that you see over here in the curtains. Some over here, some over there, and if you see the shadow here, that's coming from the 1.2K. The big light that we used here is a 2.5K.
2.5K.
Yeah, it's 2.5K inside the room. Good thing is we were shooting in Baguio City. It's if you're not familiar with Baguio City, Baguio City is the summer capital of the Philippines. So it's a city sitting among the clouds. So it's really cold over there. So the actor, yeah, so the actor wasn't phased by the heat of the 2.5K. So that's the thing that's shining over here. And then I also added a 575 over here, 575 watts. So that's to add light onto the bookshelves over here. So that's the little glow you see around here. And then to lift the shadows of the image, I added a Kino Flow somewhere in the back over here. Kino Flow, 4-bank. Yeah, so the purpose of that Kino Flow is to lift the shadows of the overall image. Otherwise, the whole thing will be so contrasty and it will defeat the purpose of my intention for this image. So my purpose for lighting this scene that way is I wanted to show the character's romantic state. So he's actually this guy who likes to write stories, who loves to write books, who loves to imagine. So giving the scene this kind of a I won't say it's a dreamy lighting, but it's a lighting that I think for me is suitable for something that evokes nostalgia. So something that evokes nostalgia. So that's why I lit the scene that way. All right, so now let's look at the behind the scenes of this image. So here you have your 575. That's actually giving this nice glow top light over here, and this little spill light going to the books over here. And then we have the 2.5K that's giving that massive light over here to combat the sun outside the window. And here's that 1.2K over here that's acting as the sun that's peering into the curtains. So going back to the first image, I also added an ND filter on the window. If I remember correctly, it's a combination of ND6 and ND9. Let's look at another behind the scenes. So here's that Kino Flow. Big shout out to RSVP Film Productions who provided all the equipment. And then there's with a conventional camera or with a cell phone camera, everything is thrown into whiteness over there. And here you see our camera, the camera that I used for this film. It was the Blackmagic Ursa, the very first Blackmagic Ursa, the big one with the iPad screen flip out. And then for my lens, I used a Samyang Cine lenses. Why I preferred Samyang? Well, for one, it's cheap. It's very affordable, you know, given that we don't have that much budget for very, very high lenses. The only downside to the Samyang lenses is that if you open it all the way to 1.2, you don't get a very sharp image. And moving on to the next scene on the trailer is this shot. And believe it or not, it was actually shot in the evening of the same day. I don't remember why it was shot in the evening. There has to be a reason why we did it, but yeah, I don't remember the reason. It was 5 years ago. So what we have here is only the 1.2K, which was angled so that it will hit the wall and it will also hit his face. And then we added a net, a full net. So it's a full stop net to give him a kind of shadow in his face over here, so his face won't be blown out by the light. And then finally on the window here, we had a cosmetic peach. I added a cosmetic peach. So this cosmetic peach actually is used for fashion photography, for portrait lighting. But yeah, I used that here to give his skin tone just that a little bit of richness. And yeah, the cosmetic peach is actually good for lighter skin tones. But if you want for darker skin tones, you can get the silver cosmetic, silver rose. And then finally, there was just one by one LED in the back, bounced onto the ceiling just to give his, just to give a little bit of glow into his backside over here. All right, and now we move on to the next scene, or actually the behind the scenes of that shot. We have here the 1.2K with an attached opal frost. So the opal frost is actually just, to give a little bit of streaking on the light. So the shadows is not that harsh, but also not that soft. But, it kind of gives, it kind of emulates the light quality of the sun. There are other gels that can do that, but I chose opal frost. And then here you see the net. And this light over here is actually a Joker bug LED light. It's not actually the Joker bug from the 56K lighting. It's actually a Chinese knockoff LED light. So this was not used. Joker bug. So this was actually not used. I just placed it there to test the light. So we just ended up using the 1.2K all the way anyway. And this one is a practical light, which has nothing to do. It's just practical light of the location. All right. And then moving on to the next scene. So what we have here is we actually have a huge panoramic window just above their heads over here. And then I used a 2.5K to light them. So I placed the 2.5K as far back as possible from the window so that the light can cover as much so the light could cover as much area as it could. And then I also placed quarter CTO on that one, CTB, sorry, just to give it a little bit of a blue lighting. And then diffusing the light are just regular see-through curtains on the window. So I love using see-through curtains for films because one, you can close the curtain and still have light coming through. And then it also gives, shape to the light, especially if the curtain is moving. It's making some really nice patterns with the light. So that's what you see here. It's just very subtle patterns over here that's coming from the curtains. And then finally, I used a Kino Flow over here with a mix of daylight and tungsten tubes. So it's, 2 daylight tubes and 2 tungsten tubes that is shooting through a 216 diffusion. So that's all that we used in this scene. So looking at the behind the scenes shot, you can see here, over here is the 2.5K that was as far back as possible from the window, and these are the curtains that I requested from the art department, and these are the GNE guys, or the grip guys rigging the camera for an overhead shot. And this Kino Flow over here, it has nothing to do with the scene actually. This was used for a different scene, and then for that shot, this was the bulbs were just turned off. And then let me just quickly tell you about. Right, Arri. Let me just quickly tell you about this Kino Flow over here. So what the gaffer did is to tape the Kino tubes directly onto the ceiling. I wouldn't recommend that if you're not an experienced filmmaker, or if you don't have an experienced gaffer on set, because Kino Flow tubes are not that cheap, and 2, it might cause an accident. But they have been doing this for a long time already, and so I trust what they're doing. And besides, they were using some really strong Gorilla gaffer tapes. Even our AD, who is a stickler for the safety on set, has approved this contraption over here. All right, so let's move on to the next scene. So in here, we have some fire going on where our character Franz was burning some books. And then this is his wife looking at him, thinking about something else. So what I did on this scene is to have a 2.5K over here with a double CTB to emulate the orangeness or the warmth of the fire. And then from the other side here, we have a 1.2K, also with a double CTB. That was flagged so that there won't be spill over here on his shoulder, and that light is actually beaming directly into Grace's face. And then what we did for these 2 lights is we had some people doing that in front of the light, waving their hands like that, to emulate the flickering of the fire. We were very like that. So this scene is a little bit tricky to shoot because we shot this out around between 9 and 10 a.m. in the morning, because our actor here, Mr. Leo, has somewhere to be in the afternoon, so we have to finish this in the morning. So so as you can see, being it shot at 9 to 10 a.m., the sun outside was not on its most pleasing position. You want to go down? Okay. All right, so I'm back. So when we shot this, the sun was actually around somewhere over here, so there is no sunlight coming in through this window. So what I did is to have a 2.5K and put it as much as possible into the corner out of frame over here. It was a little tricky to put that to have that 2.5K over there, that kind of sunlight, because I wanted using such a big light like 2.5K, you want it to be as far back as possible from the window if you're using it as a sunlight, so that it can cover a wider area. But here we have a limited space over here, because as you can see, this is just a balcony already, and it's a long drop after that. And we would have used a cherry picker or condor or crane to lift the light, but yeah, we don't have a budget for that. So we just used combo stands and, you know, pushed it as far back into this corner over here. And that sun, that 2.5K is what you see hitting Mr. Leo Martinez here. That's the light that's hitting this one. Yeah. And then we didn't have to tint, or we didn't have to put Andes on the window because these windows already have tint in it. So, and that's the reason why we also had to use 2.5, because the tint of the windows and this door is stopping down a lot of light. And then another light we have is a 575 over here, just out of frame again, shining into to Franz's side over here. So that's acting as his side light, and then later it's gonna act as the key light. So this shot is actually a long dolly shot. So we started from this point and then we curve into this point just behind this desk. So that's the end point. So when we started, the camera is pointing this direction towards Mr. Martinez, and then when we move into the end point, the camera is now pointing into a close-up of Mr. Franz. So that 575 is acting as a side light in the starting position, and then when we move into the end point, it's now acting as a key light. And then on top here, as a top light, I used a 575 that was mounted onto the ceiling, shooting through a 4x4 frame with a 250 half white diffusion. So why I used the 575 as a top light for this one instead of maybe Kino Flos or other stuff or other softer light is that because I wanted to give the scene some kind of harshness into it, some edginess into it. I wanted this picture to reflect our characters, Franz's unease sitting in this room with his boss reprimanding him. So with the 575, shooting through a 250 diffusion, half white diffusion, we get some harsh shadows, but not too harsh that it becomes unpleasing to the image, and not too soft that it becomes, you know, pleasing to the image. So with the 575 and diffuse a little bit, it gives this image an overall edginess and an ease into it, hopefully reflecting our character's emotional state. And then let's look at the behind the scenes of this shot. So here you have your 2.5K shooting to the window and giving Mr. Leo Martinez a backlight. And then over here you have a 1.2K, which I did not use because it didn't pack enough punch. Because, you know, to balance the light outside coming from the window, I had to put a ND9, and I had to stop down to T5.6 as far as I remember. So I needed bigger lights and with enough punch. And then you can see here is the 575 that's acting as the first key light, for acting first as a backlight and then moving as a key light when we dolly into this end position. And then let's look at another behind the scenes. Here is the 575 mounted onto the ceiling. It's mounted onto some support beams over there. And this 4x4 frame with the 250 half white diffusion is hanging, supported by steel wires. So that's the lighting for this setup. This shot, this one is the practical light, which we turned off when we started rolling. And then moving on to the next scene. So to light this scene, I had to emulate or to imitate the light that's coming from this lamppost over here. So what I did is to have a 575 mounted onto a boom pole with a CTO, and that's the light that you see on the floor around here. And then on the side here, I have a 2.5K shooting through 4x4 frame with a yellow gel. Also here we have a 1.2K shooting through a 4x4 frame with again a yellow gel. So why did I use yellow instead of blue to emulate moonlight? One, because I wanted this to have an urban vibe. I wanted this to be like the street lamps lighting the scene. And then two is that I want all my lighting choices to reflect the character's personality. As I said in the beginning, the character is someone who loves to write, who loves to read books, who loves to dream. He has this penchant for the past, for anything nostalgic. So using a yellow gel for me sort of emulates that kind of mood that our character is always having, the mood to think back of the past always. So the yellow gel and the CTO and all these warm lighting gels kind of emulates the past. That for me, that's what I think when I lit this one. So about why this is not anymore one of my favorite shots is because in hindsight, I should have added another light over here to, just to light this area a little bit and not throw it into severe darkness. So let's go into the next scene. So in this scene, again, this is one of the simple scenes to light. We just have a 2.5K over here with a full with a full CTO. And then on the side here, we have a Kino Flos, again with a CTO. I think it was just a half CTO that was on here. So we only use two lights for this shot. Very easy to light, and that light is shining through this lovely see-through curtains that again softens the light and gives it some kind of pattern when when the thing is moving. This scene was actually a scene in the past, so that's why I use a lot of lighting. And then I think and then for my white balance, I kept my white balance at 5600K almost all throughout the film, and then did all the color corrections in the post. So in post, we added more warmth in the color temperature of the scene. So that's what I wanted to emulate with the shots of Franz over here. So Franz is actually, in the storyline, Franz is in the present. Let's just say present. And Ethan is in the past. Ethan is this guy over here. So that's what I wanted to emulate in the present settings. I wanted to emulate the warmth of the past without going too warm, that you can't anymore distinguish between the past and the present. So that's why I'm using yellow gels and warm lights in the present. And then moving on to the next scene. So this scene is actually again in the film is depicting the past, because we have here Jess again playing the character of Ethan. So to light this scene, we have a 2.5K outside, acting again as a sunlight going through this blind. So that's what you see here, that's what you see here, that's what you see here. And over here on the corner, we have a Kino Flos fixture on the stand, very high. And that's the kind of lighting for these two people over here. So my purpose for this lighting is to give it another one of those harsh lighting, unpleasant lighting, to emulate or to reflect the emotional state of our character. So like the shot of Franz over here, where he's being reprimanded by his boss. Over here, I also wanted to reflect that kind of uneasiness with the image. So so we have this kind of harsh lighting coming in from the windows, and then everything else is a little bit darker, maybe around two stops darker than the light coming from the window. So that gives it that nostalgic look, but also unpleasant look that hopefully reflects the emotional state of Ethan over here. And then moving on to the close-up shot of Jess, close-up reaction shot of Jess. This is still the 2.5K coming from the window. We just have to angle it a little bit so it also hits these guys over here, because as you can see in that previous shot, the 2.5 is not hitting them enough. It's only hitting until Franz over here. So when we move to the reverse shot over here, we just had to shift the light a little bit so it also hits the wall over here and over here. And then this shadow you see here is actually just a flag that we placed in front of the window here, as close as possible to the window, in closer to his face. Otherwise, if you place it close to the light, it will create a bigger shadow, maybe covering this area. So placing the flag closer to the subject makes a smaller shadow. And then we angled the flag a little bit flat like that, so we only get a strip of shadow over here. So the purpose of this shadow is actually to emulate or to reflect the emotional state of the character. In this moment in the film, he's actually thinking of something that will change his life forever. It's not something sinister, but it has the ability to change his life. So by placing this shadow over here, I wanted to show that he is in a crossroads between doing this and doing that. So that's a play of light, doing this or doing that, light and shadow. So that's the purpose of me putting the shadow in his face. So let's have a look at the behind the scenes of this shot. Thankfully, I found the BTS photo of this scene. So here you have the 2.5 coming in from the blinds, and then here you have the Kino Flos with a CTO, and I think this is a 216 diffusion. And then here you have another Kino Flos on the stand for when the character walks out, and then we pan into him. He still has some light over him. And this one here is actually my founder taking a look at my setup. Now on to the next scene. Here we have a scene that was very fun to shoot, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But first, let's look at how I lit the scene. So to light the scene, this is actually a moving vehicle. Our character here, Ethan, is inside a moving taxi, and the camera is outside. To light the scene, I just added a 1x1 LED panel set to tungsten. And this was placed right beside the driver. So the driver and then the light shooting onto Jess over here. And then that's it. That's the only light that I use for this scene. Everything else, all the light over here are the practical lights. So the lampposts, these are cars and everything. So I'll tell you now why this was a very fun shot or fun scene to shoot. So again, this is part of a long take from when Ethan comes out from his room, going down onto the street, and then getting into the car. So I was on Steadicam all the way, and then I had to step onto a platform mounted onto the side of the taxi as the taxi drove away. So here you have the BTS of that shot, of that scene. Here you see the LED panel just beside the driver. And then here you have the audio guy listening into our conversations. Here I am with the Steadicam and with a 35mm lens attached. I think if I remember correctly, it was set to T2.0. I could have set it to T1.2, but doing that, it's going to soften the image and soften the image to something milky, which I don't desire to do. So I just set it to T2.0. And then here's my gaffer who acted as my guide during this shot. So I'm gonna be walking backwards over here as the actor comes in and goes into the taxi. Then I step into this platform over here where a hook and harness is waiting for me to be fastened into this railing over here. And then just over here is my AC. Pulling focus without a monitor. He's doing it by feel. He's very experienced that way. Alright, so that's the first part of the breakdown for Footprints on the Moon. Part 2 will be coming in next week, which will cover the other half of the trailer, which also contains a lot of exciting shots and exciting setups. So please do wait for that. And before we end, I'm just gonna show you a short recording of this scene right here where you can see me stepping onto the platform and taking off. But before that, let me do my extra. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you like this video and would like to see more breakdowns, you can please hit subscribe. And if you've already been a subscriber to this channel, I just want to thank you very much for subscribing. And you guys are actually the one that inspired me to come back to this channel and do more cinematography breakdowns and some other stuff as well. Alright, so please don't forget to hit subscribe, and we are now going to the video. Thank you very much, and see you next video.